Number 5 on this list is King Tut's mask. The curse of King Tut is one of the most famous curses to surround a tomb ever. King Tut was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt who boasted one of the most ornate tombs in history. This tomb carried a curse though, and those who entered it suffered fatal consequences. On the pyramids of Giza, there's a very specific curse written on the entrance. It reads, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, the scorpion on land." This curse stuck with those who entered. It all started with Howard Carter, the leader of the team, whose canary was eaten by a cobra the second that they first entered the tomb. Then the person who financed the whole excavation died shortly afterwards. And from there, a domino effect occurred where many others involved suffered horrible tragedies or passed away. Some speculate though that it wasn't actually the act of opening the tomb that sparked this curse, but it was what they did with King Tut's mask. King Tut had a burial mask on when he was mummified and put in his tomb. The mask is beautiful. It's meant to resemble the person it's on so that the gods can recognize him and bring him up to heaven. Inside the mask is a bunch of oils and materials that are said to help preserve the body. All of this is all well and good, but on the back of the mask is an inscription. This inscription is said to be a curse similar to the one on the pyramids of Giza. Well, if that wasn't enough, then there's a rumor this mask was broken during the excavation process and had to be reassembled when they took it back to their headquarters. Opening the tomb is already problematic, but to then break the mask of King Tut that has a curse inscribed on it, that's just asking for trouble. Number 4 on this list is King Casimir IV's coffin. King Casimir was born in 1427 into royalty. By 1440, when he would have only been 13, Casimir was named the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and only 7 years later in 1447 became the fully fledged King of Poland. He stood as the King of Poland right up until the day he died. Oftentimes, kings don't make it right up until their death, but King Casimir's success was pretty historic. He's known in Polish history as being one of the most politically active and prosperous kings to ever rule over their country. During his reign, he won several wars, recovered territories for Poland, and made their royal family one of the leaders in Europe. Due to all of the glory that he received in his life, it was only fitting that he have a tomb that reflected this. He died when he was 65 years old in 1492 and was put to rest in the chapel of Wawel Castle. There he lay for roughly 500 years until 1973. Researchers opened the tomb to find a horrible surprise. The researchers opened this tomb and investigated the mummification process and all the artifacts he was buried with. They took his body and coffin out of this place and brought it back to their lab. What they didn't realize though was that this coffin had a curse to it. It's estimated that over 15 people died who worked on researching this body and this coffin. It took a while before they realized what was causing this death, but eventually they discovered the error of their ways. You see, the coffin was cursed, but it wasn't cursed with anything ghostly, it was cursed with Aspergillus flavus. Cursed is also a misleading word to use in this instance as well, because Aspergillus flavus is actually a pathogenic fungus. A fungus that when exposed to people can become a killer. For a long time, people thought that there truly was an ancient curse surrounding this coffin, but it was actually this fungus that kept preying on people's immune systems. Eventually, King Casimir's body was taken and put back into his tomb, but not before the damage had been done and over 15 people had lost their lives.
Bringing it into number 3, we've got another golden oldie with the bizarre story of Theodore Edward Kos. In September 1941, America was still in the grip of the Great Depression, and Theodore Edward Kos had fallen on hard times. He decided to visit his old friend Philip Peters in the hope that his fortune would take a turn for the better. When he arrived at Philip's place in Denver, Colorado, no one was home. Philip was out to see his wife in the hospital, who was out with a broken hip. So, ever the opportunist, Theodore let himself in. Now, Teddy was a pretty small man, and he had managed to slip through a tiny door that led to a cozy little room inside the house. Facing a harsh winter, he figured it was probably best just to stay put. Now, this is where things get a little bit out of hand. Instead of just coming clean and letting Philip know that he'd snuck in while he was out, Theodore remained hidden and lived in the tiny room for weeks. Whenever Philip would leave his house, he'd sneak out, help himself to food, and use the bathroom. This lasted until October 17th, an entire month's worth of hide and seek. On that day, Teddy did his usual routine and slipped out of his hiding hole to cook some lunch. Except Philip hadn't gone out this time. He was actually napping and was terrified by the man walking around his house. Theodore attacked Peters, brutally pistol whipping the 73-year-old man to death. Instead of fleeing the scene, Teddy had gotten used to his hiding spot and returned there after the crime. Police were called after Philip's friends hadn't heard from him in a while and discovered his body while checking the house. The investigators were completely perplexed by the crime and left the case cold. Philip's wife hired housekeepers shortly after his death, but they all quickly left, convinced that the house was haunted. Teddy remained in the house for an insane 11 months until he was caught. It was only until a stubborn police surveillance officer saw him twitch a curtain. He was chased through the house back to the tiny hole that he'd been hiding in. Crazy. Now at number 2, we're going back to the basement in Beijing. In 2017, a Chinese state report highlighted the existence of an entire underground city of workers right underneath a luxury Beijing apartment complex. Homeowners of the Zhulong Gardens residence first became suspicious when they'd started to notice more and more unfamiliar faces in the apartment's lobby. After notifying officials, an investigation led to the discovery of a warren of hidden rooms starting at the building's basement. The underground space had been subdivided into separate workers' dorms, kitchens, and even a smoking room. The space was incredibly cramped and a stark contrast to the luxurious Zhulong Gardens above. The inhabitants of the warren were migrant workers who had risked an unsafe living environment just to earn a wage. Sadly enough, similar stories have been increasingly common, with Beijing reported to have the least affordable rental housing in the world. Finally, coming in at number 1, we have the story of Davis Wallman, an employee of Seattle's Como News. Well, he heard rustling in the upper levels of his Washington home. When he tried the door, he found it locked, which was odd considering that it was, his house. In the unusual position of knocking on a door in his own home, it took a while before he heard a voice reply, "Jimmy, is that you, Jimmy?" He heard more rustling as well as odd noises making their way closer and closer to him. Before he knew it, the door had swung open and Davis was confronted by the face of a strange, dark-haired woman, a complete stranger in his own home. Davis asked the woman who the heck she was and why she was in his house, but the woman insisted, "This is my house. I live here. Jimmy said I could live here." While sneakily calling 911, Davis tried to keep the woman distracted until police could arrive. Unfortunately, they took almost 20 minutes to get there, and the strange, dark-haired woman had disappeared. Davis says he has no idea how the woman had entered his house. Nothing was stolen, and there was very little out of place. Police are still investigating the case, and Davis has since changed all of the locks on his doors. Good job, Davis. Kicking off at number 5, a cemetery. Yep, you heard that correctly. Now, the trope of a home being built atop a burial ground or a pagan sacrificial site is commonly prevalent in horror literature and cinema, mainly lending itself to the rapid expansion of the modern era and the ignorance of ancient history. In cinema, we've got Pet Sematary, Amityville Horror, and Poltergeist, as well as many more, but as I say time and time again, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. That's exactly what happened in 2003 when Wisconsin woman Helen Wasensau found a child's skull after attempting to repair the foundations of her basement. Initially, she thought it was evidence of an unsolved murder, but when surveyors later found a literal cemetery spanning beneath her basement, things got a little weird. It turned out that the skull belonged to a male that was buried in 1840, and there were countless disturbed graves just sitting and waiting patiently beneath Helen's basement. The good news though is that she'd lived there for 20 years and hadn't yet been possessed by a poltergeist, so she must have been doing something right. Next up at number 4, a nest of snakes. We're going back to the USA again, a small town in Idaho where couple Ben and Amber Sessions had recently purchased what they believed to be their dream home. Yeah, be careful what you wish for. Soon after moving into the house, husband Ben started finding snakes in the yard. At first it was a few, not too big of a deal, right? This is rural Idaho. But then Ben found over 40 snakes slithering in his yard in a single day. He literally had to shovel them out by the bucket load. Then things took a turn for the worst and the couple started hearing rustling in the walls. Mice? No, it was like a slithering sound, a buzzing barrage of slithering movement, kind of like the walls were moving. Well, that's when Ben went down to the basement crawl space the next morning, and after he slid away a panel in the foundation, he stepped back in horror. The walls were filled with snakes. Turns out their dream home was actually built on a terrifyingly gigantic hibernaculum, a literal hive of hundreds of snakes living and breeding and feeding on the house's warmth. In an even sadder turn, they had to abandon the house and file for bankruptcy, not before the estate agents that sold them that house tried to put it back on the market for the next next unwitting victim though, those damn estate agents.
Number 3, the secret roommate. Do you have roommates? The odds are decent if you're a young adult watching this video, you probably do. Millennials all live with 14 other people in a house where no one's doing the dishes and we're all stealing the Wi-Fi from Ben's parents. Roommates can be fun. Nice to have someone to split a pizza with and watch Eraserhead after partaking in some stuff. But sometimes a roommate can be a total nightmare. Doesn't clean up after the shower, late on rent, secretly squats in your basement like the Phantom of the Opera. In 2013, a group of Ohio State students discovered, I'm gonna say this, probably the worst thing you could find in your basement, an extra roommate that none of you knew was living there illegally. Initially, they thought it was a joke. A group of freshmen at Ohio State moved into a co-op house and started feeling uneasy. Things would go missing, lights would be left on, objects would be moved. At first, the friends thought that they had a poltergeist on their hands and joked that the house was haunted. Well, it was, of sorts. The friends were searching for the source of these off-putting noises and they eventually found their way towards a locked door in the basement. They called in their building manager, he came in and knocked the door down and they discovered a makeshift hovel with a little living arrangement, framed photographs, and everything. There was someone living in secret in their basement. Their guest was swiftly evicted and almost heartwarmingly the students felt bad, quoted as saying, "I'm sure he's a nice guy. I feel bad he was evicted, he just wasn't supposed to be there." The scariest part of all of this is that the leasing company hadn't changed the locks in years, or asked for any keys back from any previous tenants, which was how their guest was able to get back in and sleep over for so long. Who knows how many other people could have had keys? It's a good thing it ended as benign as it did. Number 2, 1,200 skeletons. Some people have skeletons in their closet. Secrets better left unsaid and undiscovered. I'll never tell you what's in my closet. Some of us have significantly more skeletons in their closet than others, like famous founding father Benjamin Franklin, who had roughly 1,200 bones in his closet. Bizarrely. Philadelphia's second most beloved man after Frank Reynolds, Benjamin Franklin, lived in a modest home in London at 36 Craven Street. In 1776, Franklin would pack up and move out of Craven Street. There was like some new country that was getting made or something. I can't really remember the name. I don't feel like there's any records of it. I don't know if anyone knows about this. Comment if you know what that means. Well, some 200 years later in 1998, conservationists were repairing 36 Craven, looking to turn Franklin's old bachelor pad into a museum, but perhaps they should consider a haunted house attraction instead, because they discovered a meter-deep pit in a windowless room beneath the garden containing 1,200 bones. Forensic evidence suggested the bones were centuries old, lining up with when Franklin was alive. Was the founding father secretly doing Dexter Morgan stuff in his basement? He was a Freemason. Was he involved in terrifying rituals? And if Assassin's Creed 3 is to be believed as historically accurate, which I'm sure it is, he was involved with an ancient conspiracy of assassins. Now, before you raise your pitchforks at this fast-talking Canadian for besmirching one of the founding fathers, it's actually more understandable than you think. It's pretty freaky, but it's understandable. You see, back in the day, the study of anatomy was kind of frowned upon and looked down on as being grisly and unpleasant and not fit to rub elbows with proper society. So, surgeons and doctors had to turn to grave robbing to get cadavers. Franklin's spot was a safe spot for his friend and protege, the young William Hewson, an up-and-coming surgeon. The place was secure, clandestine, and owned by a trusted friend, so Hewson would dig up bodies and then bury his experiments in his good friend Ben Franklin's backyard. So, Benjamin Franklin just had some very strange friends, and he's not a deranged serial killer that we know of. Number 1, a whole city. And finally, I like to think I've saved the best for last here. We found some strange stuff in the basement so far. We got a tank, sharks, skeletons. But to top it off, we're gonna go with the strangest thing anyone ever found in their basement, an entire lost city. Basically the plot of Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe, but for real. Located in Cappadocia, Turkey, this extraordinary underground complex was discovered completely by accident in 1963 when a local man decided to renovate his basement. So if you've been sitting on your laurels waiting to get started on that home reno project, you might want to. You might have a secret kingdom beneath your basement. As the man began to dismantle a wall in his home, he stumbled upon a hidden passage that led to a vast underground chamber. Does this not sound completely made up? up like it's the plot to a video game or something. But it happened. Further exploration revealed an expansive network of rooms, tunnels, and staircases extending as deep as 18 stories beneath the surface. This would turn out to be Derinkuyu, an underground city that had remained hidden for centuries. This guy basically found Atlantis in his backyard. Derinkuyu is estimated to have been built around the 8th century. That's a long time ago, and was used by these ancient inhabitants as a sanctuary and refuge during times of persecution. The city was designed to accommodate thousands of people, featuring living quarters, kitchens, stables, chapels, ventilation shafts, even a sophisticated water system. It's believed that Derinkuyu could have provided shelter for up to 20,000 people along with livestock, ensuring their survival during extended periods of isolation. They would have loved quarantine down there. This discovery shed light on the resourcefulness and advanced engineering skills of its creators. This precision, complexity, and architectural planning involved in such a vast underground settlement were amazing achievements for their time. And some guy just discovered it by accident because it was in his backyard. That's maybe my favorite fact I have ever learned on this channel. Now, the whole real reason behind it is still a topic of speculation. Some people suggest it was primarily for defensive purposes, with its hidden location providing protection against possible invaders, while as others have proposed that it might have served as a center for religious or ceremonial activities because of how many chapels and religious iconography are on its walls. Or maybe it was just like a secret city and they were doing like a Bioshock thing and all the best and brightest were hiding out there from away from society. Anything's equally likely. When you go home tonight, or if you're at home already, I would start knocking on some of the walls or knocking on the floor just in case you have a secret kingdom hiding away. Number 5, the vampire graves. What's the number one thing you would prefer not to find inside an ancient tomb? That's actually a very open-ended question. I would say probably the living dead, right? You know, they're not supposed to be there. If that's what you said, not only are you just a little bit twisted in a way I like, but you've also got quite a lot in common with the people who came before us. It seems vampirism used to be a much bigger problem. Archaeologists in 2017 made a troublesome discovery when they discovered a gravesite in Drawsko, Poland that was host to a vampire mass burial. No, not a bunch of coffins stacked on top of each other, although that would also be pretty unnerving. No, these were skeletal remains that were found buried with sickles embedded inches away from their necks or rocks lodged deep in their jaws. Talk about a jawbreaker. This process might not make a whole ton of sense to us, it's definitely different burial customs than we're used to, was done so that when the interred decide to wake up in the middle of the long sleep and resurrect, ready to walk, the sickles or rocks would keep them in place and prevent any would-be vampires from getting up and taking over the town. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not saying we should do this to modern burials, but it probably wouldn't hurt just like a little bit, right? You know? Person who buries people with sickles around their necks is a fool every night but one. This might not be a bad idea. Researchers analyzed fragments from the Drawsko cemetery, where the vampire masquerade was uncovered, learning some interesting tidbits. The vampire's DNA all suggested that they were locals and that their bodies had been lain to rest peacefully, meaning there was no signs of a violent struggle or altercation of any kind. Of course not, you can't fight a vampire. This led the researchers to suspect that these people had fallen ill to cholera, and their symptoms had locals convinced that they might have been creatures of the night. I won't do that ever again for you, don't worry. Now we think of Dracula as sort of the king of vampires, or Edward Cohen if you will, and that vampire stories kind of come from Dracula. And while it's true that Bram Stoker codified and popularized what a vampire is, there have been stories of vampiric revenants since the 11th century in one way or another. Nice to know our ancestors were just as obsessed with vampires as we are. And if you're looking for more stories about vampires, or really any creepy crawly cryptid running around out there, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. Hit that little subscribe button, make sure you hit that bell, and click on through on our amazing catalog. If it's something freaky, we got 2 or 3 videos on it. But do all that at the end of this video, okay? I got 4 more scary tombs coming for you right now. Number 4, Taipan, Old Mexico. Once you make a career of digging up bones out of the dirt, I imagine it's kinda hard to shock you, you know? You see one scary, weird bone, you kinda seen them all. The National Institute of Anthropology and History has seen a lot of weirdness in the days since their inception. But it was this find that they uncovered recently in Taipan, Mexico that had even the most stone-faced gravedigger questioning reality. You see, beneath the Pontifical University of Mexico, researchers on a dig site uncovered 10 human skeletons. Oh, that's not that weird. Where it gets weird, they were all locked together in a spiral shape that appeared to be all interlocked together as if someone's arranged their bones to be like that. What on earth happened here? This 2,400-year-old grave has puzzled researchers and stumped archaeologists who really aren't quite sure what they're looking at, and I don't blame them at all. This sounds like the world's single worst jigsaw puzzle ever. Clay pots and bowls appear to have been placed beside them, and ceramic spheres and stones were placed into the skeleton's hands, adding extra pieces to an already complicated puzzle that is missing a lot of pieces. The archaeologists really are kind of playing out of ideas on this one. They haven't been able to decipher if these people were laid to rest from natural causes or if they were all killed en masse as part of a sacrifice or offering. They believe that what they've found could be some twisted interpretation of life, kind of like a very avant-garde art project using some questionable materials, because all the bones they found appear to range from a fairly consistent different age range, ranging from young to very, very old, so it seems as if someone's made a little life cycle and buried it there. Signs of intentional skull deformation were observed on 2 of the skulls, as well as some notable tooth injuries that looked intentional, not just like a chipped tooth or anything. Number 3. Kinshi Huang. The tomb of former emperor of China, Kinshi Huang, is notable for many reasons. Maybe it was because in 1974, when farmers from the Shaanxi province were digging a well, they discovered hundreds upon hundreds of terracotta soldiers, complete with horses, chariots, officers, infantry, and a whole court. They discovered one of the world's greatest archaeological wonders: 2,000 terracotta soldiers. Kinshi Huang's tomb. The tomb was built like this basically to serve as history's most impressive flex. Kinshi Huang wanted to make it good and clear that even in death, he held more might and imperial power than anyone could ever imagine, and he wanted his own army to take with him in the afterlife. They say you can't take it with you, but he did. What's wild is we don't even know how far this tomb goes, since it still hasn't been fully uncovered. Those thousands of terracotta soldiers, those might just have been the first wave of guys coming out the door. While he reigned, Kinshi Huang wanted to make sure his tomb was a very good approximation of his own legacy. So, naturally, thousands of laborers worked tirelessly for decades to create a tomb worthy of China's emperor. It's estimated that 700,000 laborers are thought to have worked on the tomb, which took nearly 40 years to build. Kinshi Huang only even lived to be 49, so good thing they finished that in time, eh? Kinshi Huang himself is thought to be buried beneath an enormous pyramid-shaped mound that stands a good distance from the excavated portion of the tomb. Now, according to historians, the central tomb contains treasures and wondrous objects collected during his life, included a flowing river of pure mercury, which ironically back then they associated that with immortality. Now I think we associate that with poisoning. Soil testing the nearby areas has revealed elevated levels of mercury in the dirt, so this might actually be true. However, no one is too eager to go digging or check, since it sounds like Kinshi Huang kitted this place out like a video game dungeon to keep any would-be Nathan Drakes or Lara Crofts from raiding this uncharted tomb. The tomb is said to be protected by ancient ballistas and complex mechanisms that will fire arrows at any potential grave robbers and make Indiana Jones blush. And that mercury vapor probably is not doing anybody any favors either. In any case, the Chinese government has been in no rush to explore what's down there. It's best to let the sleeping dead lie, especially when he has got thousands of terracotta bodyguards who, I don't know, maybe they're cursed, maybe they'll come to life. I just wouldn't mess with it.
Number 2. King Tut's artifacts. The new Grand Egyptian Museum was finally opened to the public in 2021 after many delays. And while that's quite recent, the contents displayed inside, they certainly are not. For the first time in history, many of King Tut's ancient belongings will be on display. Now, prior to this museum being opened, we only saw about 150 artifacts from his tomb. They all went on tour, like Kiss, they just went on tour. But now this museum in a beautiful space that spans over 7,000 square meters. That's awesome. Now, cut back to the initial discovery, not so great. November 4th, 1922, ancient history was unearthed. A team of researchers led by British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered this entrance, the literal entrance to King Tut's tomb. Now, only 3 weeks later, King Tut's actual tomb was then unearthed. Now, hasn't been disturbed in over 3,000 years, and then we came in with some shovels and made him an exhibit. Awesome. Grab your tickets. #Tut. This discovery spawned the curse of the pharaohs. Why, of course, because almost every expert involved in that discovery, they all experienced horrible luck. Many of them actually just died. Tragic events. It was crazy. Howard Carter, the archaeologist who discovered the actual tomb, he gave a paperweight to his friend Bruce Ingham as a gift. Now that paperweight in hand, pun intended, was a mummified hand wearing a bracelet. Inscribed on said bracelet read the phrase, "Cursed be he who moves my body." Ingham's house then burned to the ground not long after receiving said gift, and then when he tried to rebuild the home, it was then destroyed in a flood. That's just one example. Some people, like I said, straight up died. Car accidents, just random medical issues, sicknesses, like I said about plagues and Egyptian mummies, breathing in some old shit, it's not great. Lots of dark history being unearthed. That's all King Tut.
And finally, number 1, the Bjorktop Runestone. Vikings regularly used runes in their runic magic. What else would you use for runic magic? Vikings would inscribe the stones, and they could wield the magical power of words, the thum, if you will. This magic could take all forms, blessings, curses, and I'm sure in at least one case, probably a pretty sick fireball. The Bjorktop Runestone, and I know for a fact I am not pronouncing that correctly, so please feel free to let me know in the comments how it should be going, is a famous example of a runestone and some runic magic. Located in Blekinge, Sweden, the rock itself is surrounded by mystery, and the inscription on it carries a pretty scary warning. I, master of the runes, conceal here runes of power. Incessantly plagued by maleficence, doomed to insidious death is he who breaks this monument. I prophesize the destruction. Okay, so that honestly sounds pretty clear cut and dry what is happening with this runestone. It sounds like this stone guarantees a nice rainfall every year. No, of course not. It's a very scary warning. No one really knows what the Bjorktop Runestone represents though, or even if it's buried on top of something significant. Is it a tomb? No one's really willing to mess with it to find out. Kratos hasn't come by to ravage this place for upgrade materials yet. Is that too many God of War Ragnarok references in one video? No, of course not. If I had my way, it'd be Ragnarok all the way down. Anyway, back on topic. Anthropologists and archaeologists have done their level best to ascertain just what's going on here without tripping any possible runic curses, just to be safe. A tomb is one of the most popular theories, but there are others, suggesting that possibly it's a memorial for a real burial far, far away, possibly to mislead somebody, grave robbers maybe. A second suggestion is that it is a mighty shrine for Odin, offering him runes of power in exchange for blessings of fertility and harvest. A third, significantly less popular theory offered by some researchers is that it was put in place to somehow control the mystical powers of Icelandic singer-songwriter and my personal hero Bjork, who has been known to be completely uncontrollable.
Coming in at number 5, we have a story that found college students Brett Muglin and Mark Hartman questioning whether they would even finish their senior year. In 2013, the pair moved into an absolutely huge student house at Ohio State University. Things were going great until one morning when they woke to find every door in every room wide open. Bedroom doors, the dishwasher, the dryer, the washing machine, even the microwave. Talking to their college newspaper, they said, "We've been telling everybody the story of the ghosts in our house coming and opening all our cupboards, the microwave and oven, and all this stuff. We weren't really sure how to explain it." Things got even weirder when they would start to hear strange noises like dings and alarms late at night. They thought it was coming from downstairs, so they decided to investigate. Brett and Mark scoured the house but didn't find anything until they reached the basement, where they discovered a locked door that no one had a key to. Sounds? They were coming from inside. The noises and strange occurrences continued for weeks until Brett had a weird encounter. He was fixing the power downstairs when he came across a man they had never seen before. Without skipping a beat, the man told Brett, "I was wondering when I would get to meet the people who live here." He introduced himself as Jeremy. Later that day, when Brett and Mark were hanging out with the house's downstairs lodgers, Brett made a comment that he'd met their roommate Jeremy recently, to which they all replied, "We don't have a roommate named Jeremy." In fact, no one had even heard of a man named Jeremy. So, of course, they called the landlord, who then called the police, who then pried off the mystery basement door and inside found a livable bedroom with photos, a TV, and a wardrobe full of clothes. There were even family pictures on the walls, to which Brett later identified the man that he'd met. I told you guys, lock your doors. Next up at number 4 is something pretty different. In August of 2010, amateur antique collector Gloria Gomez was keen to explore the basement of an abandoned Los Angeles apartment building. She had caught word of 3 large trunks that had been left behind from the 1930s and was eagerly hoping to find some treasure. Unluckily for Gloria, the first 2 trunks were empty, but as she broke the lock on the third, she was astounded by what she had found. A gleaming crystal bowl, stacks of beautiful books, and an incredibly rare copy of Peter Pan. There were also 2 leather doctor's satchels, which Gloria had hoped would be worth a pretty hefty sum. While inside those bags were small bundles of LA Times newspapers from the 1930s. But what she found wrapped up in the print made her shrink back in horror. The bundles contained the mummified remains of 2 babies. Initially, not knowing if they were human, she feared that she had disturbed their spirits. Her friend had asked if they should bury them, but Gloria was adamant that they call the police. Police investigators estimated that the babies had passed away up to 8 decades ago. But as to how they had died, or why they were even there, remains a mystery to this day.
Number 3. Padmanabhaswamy Temple. India's probably got a few secret doors or 2. Keep that in mind. There might even be another secret door from India on this list. Maybe 3 or 4. Possibly more, considering how many secrets the temple of Sri Padmanabhaswamy is hiding. Located in Trivandrum, the temple is a holy shrine to Mahavishnu and was built in the 16th century. The kings of Travancore, which sounds like it would be like a really good deathcore group that you'd see for a few days, but is actually an Indian royal dynasty, renovated the place, making it the grand display of opulence that it is today. Now, the temple's not just a beautiful tourist hotspot to catch a couple Instagram photos, it's also home to 6 mysterious vaults, which is pretty interesting. 6 secret vaults. Wow. Now, these remained shut until in late 2011 when finally they were unsealed. The first 5 vaults contained immeasurable wealth. Gold, jewels, coins, idols, V-Bucks, Black Knight and the Reaper skins in there, you name it, it was there. The estimated value of everything inside there was equivalent to $1 trillion US. Now, if you can remember all the way back to 15 seconds ago, I mentioned that there was 6 vaults and only the first 5 have been opened so far. So what was in that last vault? Well, that's the trouble. Since we have no idea and probably won't anytime soon. The final vault remains closed, with 2 cobras decorating the gate with no latch to be found. Now, legend has it that in the 1930s, invaders tried to plunder the vault only to be met with a hostile end courtesy of some cobras who came from nowhere, as if there were a mystical force rather than angry snakes. Now, there are some who say the vault is protected by an ancient fatal curse, and of course, there are some too who say that the entire story of the curse is blown out of misunderstandings and overblown sensationalism, and in actuality, the vault isn't sealing anything particularly important and it's just some government red tape explaining why it hasn't been audited and opened up yet, but where's the fun in that? It's probably got like an ancient curse or some snake gods or something. Number 2, Banff Springs. Our next mysterious portway is a Canadian classic. Reason bills have passed in Canada that means 1 out of every 5 points in a top 5 scary video has to be CanCon. It was not easy finding a haunted door in Canada. I had to walk door to door trying them all until I found one. I went all the way to Alberta, but I found one and it's in Banff Springs. If you've ever been up in Alberta, then maybe you already have heard of Banff Springs before. It's pretty famous. It's regarded as one of the nicest vacation spots in the whole country. It's a little Canada fact for you. Yet there's a darker truth behind it. There's a number of haunted stories and fables of strange activity happening at this serene hotel. I've actually covered a few of the spookier ones on the channel before. Things like the mysteries, the Macaulay waitress ghost, the dancing bride ghost. Now, the Banff is willing to come clean about those ghost stories and even encourages people to go looking as they offer ghost hunting tours. But room 873 is one secret that they are trying to keep the door shut on. No one has access to room 873. Visitors, guests, hotel staff, the Pope, Nicolas Cage, no one has access to room 873 at the Banff Springs. Well, why can no one get the door open? Did we all just lose the key? Well, this one's kind of a cheat to include on this list because it's more the absence of a door than it is a scary door. You see, the door disappeared. Room 873 was on the 8th floor, and cryptically the door disappeared, like just vanished, blipped away. There was a huge wall in the middle of nowhere. If you knock on the wall now, you can feel the existence of the room, you can hear it, you know it's there, you just can't get inside it. It's narrated that in 1928, there was a heinous incident in which a father took his own life after taking the life of his wife and daughter, all in room 873. Guests would report hearing the screams of the victim's last moments, which led to the hotel barring the room. So what really happened? Will we ever know? You're more than welcome to check into the Banff Springs, but just be aware, you might not be able to leave. No, you'll be able to check out at your regular checkout time. They wouldn't function as a hotel like that if they were keeping guests forever. Number 1, the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is one of the most iconic architectural wonders in the world. Somehow, it's not one of the 7 wonders of the world, despite being wondrous. Well, amidst the wonder and grandeur behind the Mausoleum, there's a part of this beautiful building you will not find on the guest tour. There exists a mysterious door that's puzzled historians and visitors alike. It sits away in a hidden corner away from from prying eyes and YouTube hosts. What lies beyond it? Well, we don't really know. We don't really know much about that at all. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on this video. This video is not top 5 doors that we know everything that's happening behind. It's scary doors that we should never open. The legends say that the emperor who commissioned the Taj Mahal, Emperor Shah Jahan, designed the door to safeguard a treasure, or perhaps even a profound secret. Some people speculate that it conceals more priceless historical artifacts or ancient scriptures like the temple in Point 3. Some of the more compelling conspiracy theories speculate that behind the door could be something wondrous, a gateway to a parallel dimension, a passage to an underground chamber leading to a forgotten civilization, proof of extraterrestrials, the usual grab bag of ancient wild conspiracies revolving an old building. Now, attempts to crack the vault haven't been particularly fruitful. Its mechanisms remain a puzzle to be solved. Carvings, symbols, inscriptions all lost their meaning to time and aren't helping much. My advice, no one's tried the Gandalf approach, just speak friend and enter. That might crack the door open. Has a good chance of working. Whether this mysterious door holds a treasure, sacred knowledge, or hey, maybe it's protecting something evil from getting into our world, it adds another layer of mystique to the timeless beauty of the Taj Mahal and gives us something to poke around next time we're there on a visit. Reminds us that even amongst the splendor, there are still countless hidden secrets just waiting to be unlocked and mysteries to be solved. Number 5, a Panzer. Something that's pretty recurring for strange artifacts people find on moving into an old house is memorabilia or relics from one of the many wars that has existed on this warlike people. Crates and trunks full of Civil War dollars, maybe an old uniform or old medals. It's either very boring or interesting stuff if you're a history buff. I actually have a relic or two from the Soviet army in my personal collection. Maybe I shouldn't say that on the internet. What do you think is the oddest relic you could find in a basement? Old battle plans, an old helmet maybe? Maybe an entire German tank from the Second World War? In 2015, authorities were called to the attention of an 84-year-old retiree living in Heikendorf because his neighbors were suspicious about the things they thought that they'd seen in his home, referring to paraphernalia from a certain group of troublesome nationalist socialists that YouTube doesn't like me talking about. Owning memorabilia from this infamous political party, we all know the one, can carry a criminal charge in some countries and is generally pretty frowned upon in most parts of the world, even if you're telling people you're just a big Wolfenstein fan. Well, if owning a hat with the logo on it is already close to illegal, imagine owning one of their weapons of war. There's actually significantly more laws restricting the ownership of World War II weaponry than you'd expect, surprisingly. There's no specific legalese for what to do if you happen to find a fully functional, nearly 80-year-old steel titan of rolling thunder and war in your neighbor's basement, though. Among the collection, is for lack of a better term, included torpedoes and multiple munitions and weapons. It took 9 hours of excavation. They literally had to call in the German army to excavate this guy's basement. They discovered a series of uniforms and other various World War II memorabilia from a certain political party that you probably wouldn't want to have in your basement. Hey, everybody's got hobbies. Some people collect Funko Pops of the Golden Girl, some people collect weapons of war. The man was taken in and arrested, and several museums and private collections in the United States offered to buy the items off of him to preserve for museums. A noble idea for sure, but good Lord, could you imagine the shipping costs on a Mark IV Panzer? 2-day free shipping from Amazon Prime, gonna cover that? And if you're looking for way more weird stories, things people have found, cryptids, aliens, conspiracies, true crimes, basically, if it freaks you out, we've done a video or 2 on it. So please, I invite you to click subscribe. Make sure to hit that little bell so you don't miss anything, but would you kindly do that at the end of this video? Because I got 4 more weird things found in the basement coming up for you right now. Number 4, sharks. They say you need to be a shark to make it in the cutthroat world of real estate. I think that's speaking metaphorically, but I've been wrong before. Perhaps sometimes people take that a bit too far. In 2019, a 38-year-old in New York was arrested after suspicions that he was doing something strange with sharks when locals in the neighborhood noticed that he had several undergrown sandbar sharks in the back of his truck. Now, 1 or 2 sandbar sharks. When asked, he pleaded guilt to reselling the sharks to private buyers. I would have folded immediately too. I have zero idea how you can explain yourself when the cops ask why you have a bunch of sandbar sharks in your back seat. Well, as if that wasn't nearly enough hot water, things only bubbled up more when the NYPD shipped up to his house and discovered those sharks in the back seat were just the starter sharks. Inside his home was an above-ground pool in the basement containing 7 live sharks and several not as alive sharks. Whether or not they were snacks for the other sharks or just sharks that didn't make the cut, not particularly clear. Now, this might surprise you, but it's actually illegal to sell sharks out of your basement. What actually surprised me, however, is that the trade of them is the illegal part. If you get yourself a fancy permit, you are legally allowed to keep sharks in your basement, but a license costs upward of 10 grand. But imagine being able to flash your shark license at parties. Unbelievable conversation starter and probably the best opening line on Tinder imaginable if you could mention your shark license. Now, if you're worried about these basement dwelling sharks, fret not. They all found homes at the Coney Island Aquarium where they live peacefully and happily, having escaped containment to end up in a slightly larger containment with nicer accommodations. It's kind of like moving up to a minimum security prison where they let you play badminton on break.
Number 3 on this list is Black Dolphin Prison. In the first part of this video, I brought up a prison in America that is filled with horrible criminals. We're talking about the worst of the worst when it comes to felons. Gang bosses who have been responsible for tons of death and violence, serial killers, armed robbers, and much more. Well, America isn't the only place with some really tough criminals and people who should never see the light of day again. How about Russia? Black Dolphin Prison is located in Russia and it is full of evil people. If you are one of the worst criminals in that country, then you're probably gonna earn yourself a one-way ticket to Black Dolphin Prison. Wikipedia says, inmates are kept isolated and housed in cells that have a set of 3 steel doors. For 90 minutes a day, they exercise in a large cage. During this time, cells are searched for contraband or illegal items. Inmates are also under 24-hour surveillance and supervision. They're not permitted to rest or sit on their bunks from the time they wake up until bedtime, which is roughly 16 hours. When prison officers make a command to the inmates, they must respond with the words, "Yes, sir." Every 15 minutes, a guard makes rounds to ensure Black Dolphin inmates are complying with the rules. The prisoners are fed soup 4 times a day and are only allowed books, newspapers, and a radio. Prison guards place blindfolds on arriving inmates so that they can't map out the prison or plan escapes. The inmates are also blindfolded whenever they're transported between buildings. Black Dolphin prison officers have a unique form of escorting inmates as well. Prisoners are kept bent over at the waist while a guard holds their handcuffed hands behind their back higher than their hips. This escort control tactic allows for maximum control while depriving the inmate of a view of his immediate surroundings. So yeah, guys, it really isn't any joke over there at Black Dolphin Prison. Everyone in here is serving life sentences, and rightfully so. These guys cannot be allowed in public ever again, so all doors at Black Door Prison, they need to stay locked. Number 2 on this list is Minnewanka Landing. Minnewanka Landing was an old sort of town landing spot that made its profit on the tourism that was around Minnewanka Lake. This lake is in Banff, Alberta, and it's a truly magnificent spot to visit. For a while, this tiny settlement was doing pretty well for itself, and it was starting to grow. But the good times wouldn't last as long as everyone would have wanted them to. Back in 1912, the lake completely flooded. You see, there was a dam that was holding a lot of water back that broke, and the lake just overflowed. The lake's water level rose a staggering 98 feet, which ultimately meant the entire landing at Minnewanka was completely underwater. Nowadays, there's this eerie ghost town that can only be visited with scuba gear under this lake. In the general store of this ghost town, there's a locked cellar. People have tried to get it open, but it seems to be sealed shut. Thinking realistically here, there most likely isn't anything too bad under there. Probably nothing, but that hasn't stopped the rumors from growing. People are convinced that something evil could be lurking down there. A ghost, or some type of demon spirit, or maybe there are some important secrets lying within that underwater cellar. Something that could totally be under there would be some dead bodies. If anyone got trapped in here when it was flooding, then probably not going to do so hot. Nobody knows for sure, and I honestly think it should stay that way. This lake has already been through enough, so let's not push our luck here, guys. And number 1 on this list is Area 51. So this is an entry that I think a lot of you are familiar with. Area 51 is synonymous with aliens and other creepy beings that humans don't fully understand. Rumor has it that there are otherworldly creatures lurking within this base that the Americans have captured, or at the very least, there are weird human hybrids that the Americans have made themselves. Now, a lot of people want to know what's beyond these locked doors and see for themselves. There's definitely a part of me that wants to know as well, but ultimately, I think these need to remain locked. Here's my thinking. Area 51 has been around for decades. There has been tons of rumors of alien activity and a bunch of other stuff there, but let me ask you, have we been under a major alien attack in that time? Has any major city been bombarded with laser beams and other crazy stuff? No, they haven't, because the aliens are all trapped in Area 51. If we open these doors up, then out comes a bunch of alien creatures, and now we're under major attack. I'm sure that there are some really questionable things going on in that base, but sometimes ignorance is bliss, and I think that this might be one of those times.
Number 5, Keramikos. Coming up first is going to be a tomb from ancient Greece. Beautiful place, beautiful tombs. Keramikos is a beautiful neighborhood in Greece. It was the pottery center of Greece, if you can believe that, which would be interesting enough to print on a travel brochure, but it's also home to a cemetery that's existed since the Bronze Age, so that's some seriously old bones. Now, old bones aren't necessarily scary, but in 2020, when archaeologists discovered 30 stone tablets buried beneath a well, each engraved with curses crying out for help from the gods of the underworld, now maybe that's a bit cursed. The Greeks would bury curses or requests, hoping the gods would hear them and grant them favor. Personally though, word to the wise, take it from Kratos or Zagreus, never make a deal with any of the gods of Olympus. It is simply just not worth it. Apparently, this sort of thing, that is, the practice of chucking cursed tablets into the graves with your dead, was not actually that uncommon in ancient Greece. Curses enshrined on tablets made from lead, wax, and stone were fairly common in Greece, where religion, magic, and science all kind of blended together into one beautiful blurred line as the answers to a lot of life's questions. Oftentimes, these cursed tablets were used to restrict rivals, place a curse on someone you didn't like much, or if you had a court case and you didn't want someone to speak up, you could always curse them out of testifying. I'm sure Saul Goodman would have loved that trick. Researchers believe that water was especially sacred to the ancient Greeks, and that this discovery of 30 tablets in the well suggests that perhaps this was a case of someone trying to curse a whole community. It was thought too that wells were a route to the underworld and guarded by nymphs. So the scatterings of vessels and mugs found around the cursed tablets were thought to be gifts and offerings to the nymphs. Usually I just go for like a $15 Starbucks card in scenarios like that, especially if I don't really know the nymph that well. And my friends, if you're looking for more scary content, you don't need to go anywhere, you're in the right place. Stay subscribed for hundreds upon hundreds of scary videos, crypts, tombs, ghosts, aliens, cryptids, and more, oh my.
Number 4, the Alexandria Black Tomb. I'm not sure if anybody else remembers this one, but I certainly do. I remember seeing it on the news. It certainly got my attention. Here we go. Back in July 2018, experts discovered a 2,000-year-old sealed black granite sarcophagus in Alexandria, Egypt. Now, initially, yes, this is exciting. This is amazing. This is the find of a lifetime. But it doesn't take long for speculation to then creep its way in. Do we open it? Do we not open it? What if it's something bad? What if it's a 2,000-year-old ancient virus? Do we do it? I don't know. We did it. Humans being as curious as we were, we just had to see what was inside. And inside, we did not find treasure. Rather, we found mummy juice. Just mummy juice. Inside were the remains of 3 Egyptian army officers accompanied by this reddish brown sewage liquid. It was disgusting. All the experts fled the scene. It smelled so bad. This is where that sarcophagus juice meme came from. This was the actual box. Mustafa Waziri, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, he declared that the mummies had decomposed in the tomb for thousands of years and that it resembled a family burial. Yeah, family burial. How lovely is that? Nice discount on that one. There were bones of 3 people in a puddle of sarcophagus juice. That is disgusting. That is not Alexander the Great. Definitely not. The coffin was found in a tomb in the city believed to be the final resting place of Alexander the Great, so you kind of have to open it at that point, right? This could literally be him. Or it could be mummy juice from 305 BC. One or the other. Do we like this? Do we like opening up ancient curses? Did anything happen here? Waziri assured us immediately that he said that we've opened it and thank God the world has not fallen into darkness. Now remind you, this was a year before the plague arrived, so.
Number 3 on this list is the Mausoleum of Emperor Kinshi Huang. Kinshi Huang is now known as the first emperor and died thousands of years ago. The second angle says his biggest ambition was to conquer all 6 warring states of ancient China. He put an end to feudalism and reunited the country under the Qin dynasty. In 1974, some farmers were digging a well near the old Chinese capital of Xinyang when they discovered a strange figure, a terracotta soldier. The excavation project that lasted for more than 4 decades revealed several thousand soldiers protecting the mausoleum of the emperor. According to researchers, there might be around 8,000 soldiers. So far, 2,000 have been excavated. Using high techniques such as remote sensing, ground-penetrating radar, and core sampling, the scientists have given shocking research. The Emperor's tomb is much larger than it is believed, almost 38 square miles. However, the only guess so far is what Han Dynasty historian Sima Xin has written in his history records. According to Sima, the mausoleum contains palaces and towers along with treasures. Now, unlike some other entries on this list, this would definitely be a cool one to open, but it just never should be. Archaeologists who have looked at this before don't see any way to open it up without completely destroying everything inside. They obviously don't want to do that because there could be some incredible history in there, so we need to be patient. Basically, just wait until we get better technology and figure out a more efficient way of opening this thing up. Number 2 on this list is room 873. This room is located in Canada in one of the country's most haunted hotels. The second angle says Banff Springs in Canada might be the best vacation to be at. The ambiance of the hotel is peaceful and unhurried, created with the view of Mount Rundle and Bow Valley. However, there is an unfolding mystery behind the majestic hotel. Many ghost stories have emerged over the years, such as the Sam Macaulay the Bellman, the Dancing Bride, and room 873. The hotel management acknowledges the truthfulness of these stories, except the one mysterious room 873. No guest is allowed into the room, including the staff of the hotel, and how could one enter when there is no door? Yep, you heard me right, guys, there is no door. Room 873 on the 8th floor is mysteriously missing. There's no door to room 873, but instead a long stretched wall at the spot where the door was supposed to be. However, when you knock on the wall, it's hollow, which confirms a room behind the plastered wall is in fact present. Legend has it that in 1928, a shocking incident occurred. A married couple and their daughter checked in, but none of them was alive to check out of the hotel. During the evening, the father murdered his wife and daughter before killing himself. From that day onwards, guests who booked the room 873 were found complaining about screams and bloody handprints of the girl on the mirror. As a result, the room was sealed. This hotel is on the list of the most haunted hotels ever. Ghost hunters have been to this place and have confirmed that there is in fact some wicked ghostly stuff going on. At this point, there are spirits circulating around the whole place, but the hot spot is definitely inside room 873. I mean, how often do you hear about a hotel bricking up one of their rooms? From a business standpoint, it just doesn't make any monetary sense, because how can you make money off of that room if it's bricked up? So that should just further enforce the fact that this room is beyond saving and is way too haunted to enter. Number 1 on this list is ADX Florence. ADX Florence is quite possibly the most dangerous prison in the world. What I mean by that is that it houses the most dangerous criminals that the world has ever seen. How Stuff Works says, among nearly 400 male inmates at ADX are several infamous characters. El Chapo, the notorious drug kingpin, was sent to ADX after escaping twice from maximum security prisons in Mexico. The Unabomber is in there. So is Eric Rudolph, the Atlantic Olympics bomber, the Oklahoma City bomber Terry Nichols, the 1993 World Trade Center terrorist Ramzi Youssef, and Michael Swango, a doctor who poisoned and killed up to 60 of his patients. Prisoners don't end up in the ADX by accident. Many have committed murder either on the outside or in other prisons, including killing guards. Others are hardcore gang members who have ordered or carried out prison hits. So what door am I referring to here? Well, basically all of them. If there is a locked door in this prison, then it needs to stay locked, because my dudes who are chilling behind said locked doors, they do not need to be getting back into the public anytime soon. These criminals are the worst of the worst, and having them roam free really wouldn't be good for anyone.
Coming in at number 5, Duffel Bag. One of the many stories hailing from Reddit, this user tells of the time they were sharing a house with some friends, and on one particular night they decided to explore the basement. as you do, considering they hadn't been down there since they had moved in. The user describes a small dirt crawl space in the basement, so one of the men decided to grab a flashlight and check it out. However, soon after the man yelled out after discovering something quite concerning. He emerged carrying a duffel bag, which contained items that would send chills down most sane people's spines. But not mine, never mind, I don't understand the concept of fear. It's called being a sociopath. Anyway, the bag contained a hunting knife, 2 black ski masks, and 1 single black leather glove. Very O.J. Simpson. The group called the police immediately, but for some strange reason they couldn't do anything with the evidence, so the group decided to burn everything except for the hunting knife, which the user states that he still possesses. If it were me, I would have burned that as well. You never know who may return one day looking for that knife. Coming in at number 4, pet gator. A Michigan reptile expert has some advice for you animal lovers out there. Do not get a pet alligator. Period. Because it will get bigger, and when it does, it will bite you and try to eat you. According to reports, a man in Michigan owned an illegal pet alligator which he kept in the basement of his home. Yes, you heard me correctly, the basement of his home. The gator was apparently kept in a cage away from the outside world and even far away from light, where still the man stated that he would often let the gator out into the backyard to play, I guess? I don't know. Thankfully though, the gator was taken off his hands when a mechanic who was fixing something in the basement took pictures of the illegal pet and called animal control. The gator was thus released back into the wild, with the man being charged for owning an illegal pet. However, this wasn't the only case of a person owning a gator, which is baffling to me. According to reports, pet gators are on the rise in Michigan specifically, with at least 6 of the scaly creatures being spotted on the loose, popping up in lakes, parks, and backyards. On one occasion, a man was seen lassoing the neighbor's pet gator when they found it tromping across their yard after it made an escape. The owner of the gator, named Puff, took it back home before stating, "It's hard for people to understand. People judging me don't know about alligators. They make good pets." Sure, Jan.
Number 3 on this list is the Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. The Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall wasn't necessarily from a tomb, but it was recovered from a grave, so I think it still counts in this criteria. Burton Agnes Hall was built in the 17th century in Yorkshire. It was built by Sir Henry Griffith, who had 3 daughters he loved very much. They all moved there and were very happy for a time. One of the daughters was named Anne, and Anne loved to explore the outdoors. One day though, when she was exploring, a gang of robbers got to her and they beat her and left her for dead. When the family found her, there was barely any life left in her. They brought her back to their home, but her time on this world wasn't long. While she was dying, she had a very strange request to her 2 remaining sisters. She begged them to take her head and put it within the walls of the hall so that she could always be there with her family. She was dying, so they agreed, but neither of them actually intended on taking their sister's head off and keeping it in their home. A few days later, she died, and they buried her outside the hall without keeping their promise. This was a big mistake though. After she was buried, strange noises and banging sounds started happening all over the hall. Screams and crying could be heard throughout, and moans the family couldn't ignore. Eventually they gave in, dug Anne up, and took off her head. They brought it into the hall, and the disturbances, they stopped. But years passed and the ownership of this hall changed. The new owners, they had no interest in a dead girl's skull in their home and got rid of it, but sure enough, just when they did, the noises and the hauntings started again. Over the centuries, people have tried and tried again to rid themselves of this skull many times, but eventually they always cave and they have to bring it back in. The skull truly is cursed, and it must remain inside the home at all times if you ever want any peace from Anne's spirit. Number 2 on this list is King Tut's statuettes. King Tut's tomb didn't just have one cursed item, it had multiple. His burial mask is pretty widely known, but many don't know the story of 2 statuettes that also came from this tomb. These were 2 small bronze statues found inside the tomb. One of them with their hand over their heart, and the other one with their hand over their mouth. Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the initial excavation, gave these to a friend as a gift. This was meant to be in good faith and a friendly gesture, but he had no idea the trouble that they would cause. The name of the family is omitted in this story to protect their integrity, and the person who received the statues is simply referred to as James. James received these statues and brought them back to America with him, but then started to suffer the consequences. Once wildly successful, James started to lose everything: his company, his money, his family. James went through 3 failed marriages, a complete collapse of his immense fortune, and finally died of illness without ever realizing these statues were part of the problem. He left them to his grandson in his will, and the curse continued. When his grandson took hold of these statues, he was a decorated Olympian, but he also suffered a serious fall from grace. Injuries, other accidents, and failed business ventures plagued the grandson from the second that he took hold of these statues until finally he called the museum. He donated them to the museum so that they could be put with some of the other King Tut pieces and the curse could finally be lifted from his family. Now, it's certainly possible that this was all a coincidence and this family just got down on their luck at the wrong time, but anything involving King Tut has the potential to be cursed, and I wouldn't be surprised if these statues were part of that. Number 1 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. The Unlucky Mummy is an ornate wooden coffin that was found in an ancient Egyptian tomb. This coffin's preservation was remarkable for how old experts thought that it must be. The coffin was said to hold the remains of ancient Egyptian princess Amun-Ra. The legend says that in 1890 some British men stumbled upon this casket at an Egyptian excavation site. There were 4 men and they all suffered greatly right after coming in contact with this coffin. The first man, who initially took ownership of the coffin, was seen leaving his hotel and walking straight into the desert to never be seen again only after 1 day of possessing said casket. The second man on the very next day was accidentally shot and had to have his arm amputated. The third man, when they did eventually get back to Britain, returned to see that all of his life savings were gone. And the last man died from disease shortly after the discovery of this artifact. And just like that, the curse of the Unlucky Mummy began. Now, there are some misconceptions with this mummy. Some people believe that the Unlucky Mummy got put onto the Titanic ship and that's what caused the Titanic to sink. That was never the case though. In fact, once the coffin got to Britain, it's never left. That doesn't mean that this thing isn't still cursed though. It currently resides at the British Museum in London. Since its arrival there, other rumors about this ancient artifact have come out, such as the untimely death of writer Bertram Fletcher Robinson. He was convinced that there was no curse surrounding this coffin. In fact, he even wrote extensively on that topic, but then he died shortly afterwards. Incidents like this have happened all throughout history, further solidifying the curse around this coffin. With everything that's happened to it, the term unlucky might just be a bit of an understatement. Number 5 on this list is the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is one of the most beautiful buildings to ever be constructed. Thousands of tourists flock here every year to marvel at its architecture. I mean, it ought to be beautiful considering it took 22 years to make and 32 million rupees to finance. There is a large area where tourists are allowed to go, but underneath all of that, there's an area where no one's allowed to go, and that's actually a lot bigger. Hamari Webb says below the areas where tourists often visit, there's an entire story with entrances sealed behind marble arches. It's believed that there are 1,089 rooms in this hidden level. There's another floor hiding approximately 22 rooms hidden behind Hindu paintwork. Even on the open first floor, there are numerous mysterious locked doors that no one is able to unseal. What is hidden in these sealed areas? There are several theories. The prevailing belief is that these areas were built hastily and do not boast the same grandeur as the rest of the monuments, so Shah Jahan wanted to keep anyone from seeing them. However, not everyone believes that this is the true secret of the mysterious locked doors. According to one theory, the sealed areas of the Taj Mahal are actually hiding the woman the monument immortalizes, Mumtaz Mahal. This theory purports that Shah Jahan secretly had his favorite wife mummified so that he could keep her close to him even in death. This would have been a serious violation of the Islamic commandments, and he would have been declared a heretic had the transgression been discovered. Some also believe that Mumtaz Mahal remains in the hidden rooms in more than just body, that her spirit haunts the rooms as well. Although the Shah built this epic monument in her honor, not everyone believes that this adored spouse was as happy in life as history would have us believe. Her husband, after all, had a harem numbering in the thousands, and he and his armies were known for their sexual violence. Considering all of this, it seems best that we don't mess with whatever is truly down there. Unleashing an ancient curse upon the world seems like a horrible idea, and if we can avoid doing that, then I think we definitely should. Number 4 on this list is Pluto's Gate. Pluto's Gate should never be opened and never be traveled through because not only is it incredibly deadly on its own, but you might also end up in hell if you go far enough in. Atlas Obscura says an archaeological dig revealed the remains of an ancient temple situated on a thermal spring, long believed to have been a gateway to hell. This well-documented temple of Pluto disappeared from records sometime around the 6th century. Amongst the distinguishing features of this particular gate are the toxic fumes which waft out from tunnels beneath. In times of antiquity, these were often inhaled by the priests of Pluto, promptly sending them into hallucinogenic trance states. Writing at some time around the year 0 AD, the Greek philosopher Strabo claimed that any animal that passes inside meets instant death. Even now, the poisonous vapors claim the lives of birds that fly or nest too close to the ruins. So I think that based on that, it's pretty clear why this should never be opened and why we should never go into it. At the very least, you're going to go into a hallucinogenic trance by entering into here, which probably isn't going to result in the best decision making. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is you get close to death from the poison and then stumble into hell where the devil or some demon finishes you off. Let's lock this thing off and stay away, shall we?
Coming in at number 3, Ben Franklin skeletons. Old Benjamin Franklin, the first American and a founding father of the United States, inventor of the bifocals and the Franklin stove. He's got nothing to hide, right? Well, it turns out that he had quite a few skeletons in his closet. Well, basement, actually. In 1998, conservationists back in England began making repairs on Franklin's London home, 36 Craven Street, when they stumbled upon a pretty bloody discovery. It turned out in the basement of the house, more than 15 bodies, 6 of which were children, were buried in a secret windowless room. However, although I'm not entirely convinced, it's widely considered that Ben Franklin wasn't harboring evidence of some horrific homicide, but may have actually been covering for his friend William Hewson, Franklin's friend and academic protege that was running an anatomy school at the time. In the 18th century, human dissection for scientific purposes was still ethically frowned upon, and students had to acquire cadavers illegally. This included paying grave robbers to dig up remains of the newly deceased. So Ben Franklin was just being a good friend, right? Either that or he was a sadistic mass murderer. Next up at number 2, mummified children. Yeah, you're going to be seeing a pattern with our next 2 points. Pretty morbid stuff. Back in 2010, 2 women, Gloria Gomez and Yiming Jing, found 3 large trunks in the basement of the once Grand Glendonald apartment in Los Angeles. After opening them, they found what appeared to be a hoard of antique treasure, a gleaming crystal bowl, stacks of beautiful books, including an original copy of Peter Pan, and 2 leather doctor's satchels. Thinking they were worth a hell of a lot of money, they started digging deeper, but when they found a small bundle of newspapers in the satchels, they shrank back in horror at what was wrapped inside them: the mummified remains of 2 babies. It turned out that the trunk was owned by a Scottish-born nurse by the name of Janet Mann Barry, a strange coincidence as the same initials of the author of Peter Pan. The possibility of her being related to the author was explored, but detectives found no such connection. Through DNA evidence, detectives found that the corpses were the children of the nurse, and although the case is closed, the explanation for the baby's death will likely never be discovered. And finally, our number 1 point, a mummified corpse. See, I told you we were sticking to a theme. Imagine exploring your newly purchased house, making your way to the lower levels, and then discovering a literal mummified corpse sat on a chair staring at you. Well, that's exactly what happened to Jorge Giro, who'd purchased a home in the seaside town of Roses, Spain. It turned out that the previous owner had mysteriously disappeared, but that actually meant she'd passed away peacefully, but no one had checked on her. I mean, it's actually insane that no one had checked the house before selling it at auction, and this is where it gets even crazier. No one knows how long the corpse had sat there, but the mortgage payments to the house had ceased 6 years prior. 6 years just sat there mummifying in the salty sea air, serendipitously waiting for Jorge to discover her. Wow, let's hope there were no curses involved, eh?
Number 5 on this list is the Great Sphinx of Giza, one of the coolest things humans ever constructed. You may think that we know everything there is to know about this sculpture, but that just isn't the case. The second angle says, the Great Sphinx of Giza, a mythical creature with the body of a lion and head of a human, was built 4,500 years ago. It took 100 workers and 3 years to complete it. The mystery of the Sphinx is that there lie 2 rectangular chambers at the depth of 25 feet. These chambers were discovered by seismographs and are located under the Sphinx paws. The researchers are of the view that there are 2 entrances to these chambers, but they're sealed. Government officials have restricted further research, and hence what lies behind the doors remains a mystery. However, some theories believe that the door to the chamber will lead us to the Hall of Records that contain document scrolls in which the Egyptians had managed to record the history of the missing continent of Atlantis. Now, for one, if there is the history of Atlantis inside the Sphinx, then that is wicked cool, and frankly, I wish that we could learn about it. But some people think that the government is holding a few things back. We've talked a decent amount on this channel before about the pyramids, and when they first initially opened the pyramids and went inside, a curse swept through the people who entered, and a lot of those individuals died in tragic and unexpected ways. From what I've read, people are pretty scared of the same thing going down with the Sphinx. We open it up and maybe we find out some really cool stuff about the ancient Egyptians, but also we may unleash some sort of curse on everyone who tries to learn about this. So we're stuck in this weird catch-22 place where it just doesn't make sense. The Great Sphinx of Giza is one of the biggest mysteries in the world, and the secrets that it holds might change lives. It just also might cost lives at the exact same time. Number 4 on this list is the Padmanabhaswamy Temple. Not only is this a really hard thing to say, but it's also super dangerous to go inside. The second angle says, India has yet another mysterious door that has not been opened since the 16th century. The Temple of Sri Padmanabhaswamy is in Trivandrum. The temple is a holy shrine to Mahavishnu and was built in the 16th century, and later the kings of Travancore, known for their wealth, renovated it. The temple has 6 vaults, A to F, and had been never opened until 2011 when 5 out of the 6 vaults were opened. Treasures including gold, jewel, coins, and idols were discovered from these vaults. The estimated value of wealth was $1 trillion. That is a pretty big number to grasp. Well, you might be wondering, what about the 6th vault? The B vault remains closed even today, with 2 cobras decorated on the gate with no latch, revealing that the vault is guarded by the cobras. The legend has it that in the 1930s, some temple invaders tried to get into the vault, but could not succeed because of the terrible cobras that came out of nowhere. Also, there is a belief that the door is protected by a fatal curse and can only be opened by Sadhu, who has the knowledge of Garuda mantra. Think about it, guys. There could literally be millions, billions, trillions of dollars worth of stuff inside this vault, and it still isn't worth it for us to open it. That's how you know that something is dangerous. For all we know, there is some giant and deadly snake that's living and lurking inside there like the basilisk from Harry Potter. There could be a huge monster inside of this temple just waiting to come out. Millions of dollars doesn't mean anything to anyone if you're dead.
Coming up next in our list of scary ancient tombs is the Chevin de Hontar. What secrets lie beneath the tombs above? Well, that's what we're aiming to find out with this whole video. That's been the whole purpose of this whole thing. The only trouble is it isn't always so easy for humans to dig around the annals of archaeological dig sites. For one thing, things get pretty rickety around there. You make one wrong move, the whole foundation collapses, and we can only get where we can reach. And that's why sometimes we need a little help wherever we can get, sometimes from some unusual sources. The Chevin de Hontar is a temple located deep in Peru, thought to be over 3,000 years old. Chevin de Hontar is renowned for its impressive architectural features, intricate stone carvings, and religious significance. The site consists of a complex of structures built around a central plaza, including temples, plazas, galleries, and underground passageways, and I think a water park they have installed kind of recently. The buildings are constructed using stone blocks and are decorated with elaborate carvings depicting mythical creatures and deities. Well, American and Peruvian archaeologists were digging beneath this temple, trying to uncover uncover all the secrets it was holding. And in order to truly explore the depths, they brought in a series of rovers to dig for them, and they uncovered a massive series of connected tunnels, 35 in all, spanning thousands of feet, a complicated network running underneath the tunnels. Inside, they found what looked like evidence of a gallery of sorts, ceramic fragments, tools, artwork, offering bowls, and some remnants of a few human skeletons. Wouldn't be a temple without a few human sacrifices, right? Researchers believe this was a gallery, referring it to as the Gallery of the Offerings. Could there have been a darker purpose, though, behind the constructions of the tunnels deep underneath the Chavin de Hontar? Does the Gallery of the Offerings mean these were human sacrifices being offered up to the gods above? And who knows more? What secrets could be hidden within? We're gonna need even smaller, tiny little robots to dig through it, I think. Number 2, King Tut's grave. Quite possibly one of the most famous tombs of all time, if not the outright most famous. King Tutankhamun's tomb is practically synonymous with the imagery of mummies and sarcophagi, as well as being the bearer of a deadly curse. When British archaeologist Howard Carter and his crew discovered the tomb in 1922, they thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, triumphant pride often precipitates a dizzying fall, and soon after, Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy baron who funded the expedition, would pass quickly and unexpectedly from a mosquito bite that he received in the tomb. In the years that follow, a surprising amount of people involved in the expedition all fell into inexplicable sickness or bad fortune. Some died in particularly mysterious circumstances, such as accidents or deaths that seemed like they had been smothered, or sudden comings on, a rapid onset of illness that would take them over. Speculation swirled that this was the result of disturbing the eternal slumber of Tutankhamun, the legendary pharaoh who ascended the throne at a very young age. Because he was a pharaoh, it was believed that his tomb was protected by divine blessings, and this curse was punishment for breaking through those seals. However, this is a pretty oft-repeated historical fun fact. You see it all the time in books and YouTube videos, but there's no evidence to suggest that there was any threat of a curse inside the temple properly. It's attributed all the time that there was an inscription on the sarcophagus or the walls of the tombs bemoaning a curse for disturbing the slumber of the pharaoh, but these things seem to have been added as the story gets told and retold as extra dramatic details to make a bunch of mysterious but probably unconnected deaths seem like they were the result of an ancient curse. It could just easily have been as likely that the curse was breathing in 1,000-year-old dust and being bit by infected mosquitoes before modern medicine. But you have to admit, it is definitely just a little suspicious. Coming up last on our list of strange tomb finds is going to be the Aztec Skull Rack. If you and your buddies needed a name for your hardcore band, that name is totally up for grabs, just saying, and I will be there moshing at your first show. The Aztec people were known for their agriculture, their art, their funny calendars, and also their propensity and love of a good human sacrifice. To be fair, can you blame them? You know, there's certain cultural differences and sensitivities at work here. Sure, to us, it might seem a bit barbaric to kick a severed head like a football, but to them that's Sunday night, baby. So the Aztecs like to sacrifice a man or two. But what came of all those bones that were sacrificed? Well, outside the Templo Manor in the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, researchers discovered an enormous zampatli, or in more casual terms, a skull rack. Flanking the skull rack was two giant towers made up of a substance you could probably guess: human skulls. Researchers suspected that there were thousands of skulls in these walls, maybe more, letting you know just exactly how many people were sacrificed and offered up to the gods. You ever see like the inside of a lamp that you haven't checked in on a while and it's got a bunch of dead flies in it and you wonder how many are in it? This is like that, but for skulls, and it was part of a wall. The skulls likely belonged to enemy warriors and those deemed sacrificial, which is something my boss called me last week. Archaeologists theorized that once the skulls started to deteriorate on the rack and lose some of their flavor, they would get moved to the towers. When the Spanish first discovered the city of Tenochtitlan, they wrote about how horrifying they found the towers, and it's hard to blame them. I'm describing them to you now, and they sound horrifying. Imagine seeing them up close and personal, but I'm not gonna lie. It would be kind of metal though, just like just a little bit. Number 5, the Great Sphinx. The Sphinx, a majestic and enigmatic structure located on the Giza Plateau in Egypt, has captivated the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and explorers for centuries. This massive lion-bodied monument with a human face is definitely interesting looking. Kind of makes you think that maybe the Egyptians didn't quite know what lions look like. But that's not what we're talking about today. It's the mystery inside it surrounding these potential secret chambers within that we want to know about. Although there's no official evidence to support or confirm that there's hidden chambers inside the Sphinx, first of all, yeah, we all know there are. But second, numerous theories and speculations have arisen over the years. Some believe that there are concealed passageways or chambers beneath the monument just waiting to be discovered. These theories are rooted in ancient Egyptian beliefs and legends that suggest the Sphinx guards hidden treasures or secret knowledge. I know it certainly knows a thing or two about riddles, so secret knowledge is not out of the question. A popular hypothesis is that the Sphinx conceals a secret entrance leading to the legendary Hall of Records, a vast library containing ancient texts and very valuable artifacts. This theory was first brought forth by the clairvoyant Edgar Cayce in the early 20th century. According to Cayce, the Hall of Records holds the key to humanity's forgotten history and advanced knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of the past. It's a bunch of Polaroid photos of aliens building the pyramids, I think, that's been kept under lock and key. Now, others propose that the Sphinx's tunnels may lead to unexplored areas beneath the Giza Plateau. Some claim that these hidden spaces could contain burial chambers, sacred artifacts, or even the tombs of long-lost pharaohs. Now, despite all of these theories, extensive studies and archaeological investigations have not quite yet found concrete evidence of hidden chambers within the Sphinx. We're getting there, I'm pretty sure. Modern scientific techniques such as ground-penetrating radar and scanners have been employed to explore the monument structure, but as of now, no conclusive findings have emerged. And you know what? That's probably a good thing, to be honest. You read about King Tut, knowing how many curses are inside ancient Egyptian buildings, maybe let's just leave that one alone. And if you're looking for more stories of terrifying portways, freaky windows, we might have some of that. We've got more actual topics about things like aliens, cryptids, sharks, ghosts, ghouls, whatever freaks you out, we've got a video or two on that. So click on through, hit subscribe. Please make sure to hit that little bell to make sure you get every single video, but you do that at the end of this one, okay? Because I got 4 more scary doors just waiting for you to open them. Number 4, the Terracotta Army. Do you ever think in human history just how many stories have simply been lost to time? How many common men who lived simple lives we may never remember? Well, Kinshi Huang clearly was worried about this because he insisted that he have a grave that would ensure he would be remembered by history. His tomb was basically history's most impressive flex. When farmers from the Shaanxi province in 1974 discovered Kinshi Huang's tomb, they couldn't believe what they'd uncovered. Hundreds upon hundreds of terracotta soldiers, complete with horses, chariots, officers, infantry, and a bear. Oh my, no bear. That was a joke, but the rest was real. 2,000 terracotta soldiers protecting their former emperor. What's even more bombastic is that we're not even sure if this is all the soldiers, since the tomb hasn't been fully uncovered. These 1,000 terracotta soldiers might just be the first wave of guys coming on in. Kinshi Huang wanted to make sure his tomb was an approximation of his legacy. Uniting 6 warring states and ending feudalism needed a pretty good bookmark. He himself is buried beneath an enormous pyramid-shaped mound that stands a good distance from the excavated portion of the tomb. Historians suspect that the internal tomb contains treasures and wondrous objects that Kinshi Huang collected during his life, untold priceless relics and treasures hidden away. Although, perhaps as a bit of a deterrent, there is also a flowing river of pure mercury. Doesn't sound like a super great idea, but you have to remember that back then, kind of paradoxically, they associated mercury with immortality instead of associating with poisoning. Soil around the tomb has been shown to have elevated levels of mercury, so they're not joking about that one. Now, no one's too eager to actually check anytime soon because this uncharted territory has a series of protections to keep out any tomb raiders. Nathan Drake and Lara Croft would need a lot more than quick reflexes here, as the tomb is said to be protected by ballistas and ancient booby trap mechanisms. Also, I'm just gonna say, 1,000-year-old mercury vapor, that cannot possibly be good for your respiratory systems. So perhaps it's best to leave this one sealed and let 2,000 sleeping soldiers lie.
Coming in at number 3, secret bunker. So this point should be prefaced by saying, whenever a homeowner passes away, real estate agents sell the house as is, with all the contents still inside, for the most part, which to me is absolutely horrific. And on one particular occasion, this happened. However, the new homeowner was thrilled to receive some new goods and furniture and headed to the basement to survey the rest of his loot. However, when he got to the bottom of the stairs, he found an odd sheet of plywood attached to the wall. He went to remove it, but discovered something truly harrowing: an entrance to a secret room. The room was just 4 by 4 feet, but it was filled with the unthinkable. It contained several gun cases and manuals, a giant safe, an assortment of ammo, and a hollowed out grenade. The man also discovered a chest containing money, but sadly it was just pennies, but beggars can't be choosers. Now, whether it was a doomsday bunker or something much darker, we will never know. But what do you guys think? Coming in at number 2, a stranger. Now this one is just downright terrifying. One ordinary day, a group of college students who had been living in the house for some time discovered something oddly suspicious. The group discovered a secret room that was quite clearly being lived in. Now the entire house was being shared by 15 people, so it was difficult to keep up with everyone in the house, with most of the boys just assuming that the locked basement room was a maintenance closet that the landlord wanted to keep closed. However, when maintenance workers knocked on the door down there, they discovered a bedroom complete with framed photographs and textbooks. Creepier still, during the summer, one of the students walked into the basement and encountered a man who said he had wondered when he was going to meet the new residents of the house. What? And when asked if he lived on the first floor, the man skirted around the question. The group of students had the locks changed that night and posted a note asking their uninvited house guest to call them, which surprisingly he did. A man named Jeremy ended up contacting the students before moving his belongings out of the room. It actually turned out that Jeremy's cousin had lived in the house the year prior, which is how he got in, according to the housemates. The locks had never been changed. Rookie mistake. Talk about a dangerous situation. Thankfully, it wasn't a lot worse.
I'd been telling everybody this story about the ghost in our house, coming and opening all our cupboards and the oven and the microwave and all this stuff.
And finally, coming in at number 1, we have doll family. In my opinion, there is nothing creepier than a doll. Actually, sorry, I'm wrong. There is nothing creepier than a cluster of dolls. That's right, cluster. Let's say a family of dolls living beneath your house without you ever knowing. Yeah, sounds terrifying, right? Well, one Reddit user stumbled across one thing no one would ever want to see: a family of dolls in a basement, seemingly behind bars. A restaurant in Phoenix was home to this horrific basement scene, with the person who discovered it descending down a long spiral staircase that led directly to the basement. And of course, he would regret his decision immediately. The image itself shows a line of dolls sitting along a wall at a makeshift table, as if they were about to eat dinner. However, upon further observation, you can clearly see that it is less of a dinner and more of a Last Supper, with the doll in the middle looking strangely human and clearly depicting Jesus. It doesn't stop there though. There are also coins spread out across the table, with the scene surely haunting the man to this day. However, like all terrifying things, this was not the only encounter with creepy dolls. This old lady doll was discovered in the basement of an estate sale. It's incredibly frightening to look at, and worse still, the doll has the body of an old woman, something you typically don't see on any doll ever. Not to mention the expression on the doll's face is one of anguish, preventing you from looking at the picture for longer than a couple of seconds. Unless you're me, I stared at it for hours. I'm still looking at it now. The Reddit user who discovered the doll stated that there was a name carved into the back of the doll's neck, suggesting it was the previous owner. Worse still, the doll was discovered in a black box, tightly secured, suggesting someone didn't want it to be opened.